Thank you for welcoming me on board in this nice program. With Hervé, as he said earlier, will work hand in hand because, as he said, it's closely linked, the two programs. So my first actions will be to have closer links with the alumni. So do not feel surprised if you get called individually in the coming days, because we will propose you some events, working with us quite closely, organizing maybe some conferences where you can provide what you did during your professional career and so on and so on. That's a very nice program, and I have been teaching this program for more than 10 years. Nice topics that you know by heart, finance, but I try to share with you to give you some insight about different tools. And now we have Eugène, outstanding speaker who is fond of the MBA, and I give the floor to Benedict, who will introduce him. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. So just to let you know that we are in the room, but we also have people connected. Some of them are not from the Executive MBA or not yet part of the program, but might be someday very convinced by what they're going to hear tonight. So as an information for newcomers, this talk is part of a series of conferences that we organize within the program of Kedge Executive MBA with the objective of bringing knowledge and content and opening minds on various topics. So we will go further a little bit with Eugène later. So for those who wish to know more about our Executive MBA program for the newcomers, it is an 18-month part-time MBA dedicated to senior executives, delivered on several campuses, Paris, Marseille, Bordeaux, and also in China. For more detail, please do not hesitate to contact our admission officers. We have Cathy Abécassis here in the room, and we also have Émilie Delphos in Marseille. And the touch base with them. Now, to introduce our special guest speaker tonight, I'm very glad and honored to introduce Dr. Eugène KOGAN. He's the founder and managing director of KOGAN Global Advisory, a negotiation strategy and executive coaching practice. He holds a PhD from Brandeis University. He has been helping executives and for 15 years to successfully navigate high uncertain environments and more and more uncertain environments. As an executive coach at Harvard Business School, he has counseled city mayors in Eastern and Western Europe on innovative approaches to team management and external communications. He has also delivered value for private sector clients in various industries. I think LVMH, if I remember well, Geodis also, and that's it. So Eugène also, you'll find out, co-authored a book, which is there behind me, Mediation, Negotiation by Other Moves, and 5 copies of this book are going to be delivered tonight randomly. So Eugène will explain how. And he will dedicate them at the end during the cocktail. Yes. And last but not least, let me add that Eugène KOGAN is a first-generation immigrant in the United States. He has lived overseas for 17 years and has developed a cultural acumen to manage diverse situations and crises, probably. He has native fluency in both English and Russian, and he has a working proficiency in French. Okay, so but you don't use it much, Eugène, do you? Last point, please prepare your questions. There will be taken at the end of the session. And well, now, Eugène, the floor is all yours.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Benedict. Thanks, everybody, for coming, both in person and online. And I understand I was told that if I walk from here, to hear that I will be in the view. So folks behind me can probably see me somewhere. So I will occasionally wave at them. How is everybody doing tonight? First of all, right? I can see it is 6 o'clock, but crisis leadership requires stamina and energy. And so I'm hoping I can get a more energetic response this time around. How's everybody doing? This is, we have among us, you may not know, but we have among us pilots from Air France. And I will not point fingers, but I will say that's the gentleman who flew me. Right, come up, and then say who you are. He literally flew me to Paris. So if you connect with me on LinkedIn, which you'll be able to do after this presentation, you'll see who literally flew me to Paris. I was in the cockpit of the airplane, so I was very, very excited. And for that, he gets an opportunity, right? For that, he gets an opportunity for free to attend my lecture, which is. Yes, right. They needed somebody to steer the plane. So our plan for today will be to spend maybe about 30 minutes, 35 minutes on some principles of crisis leadership. And then we'll open it up to questions. And before I go there, I'd like to thank Stefan and Hervé for having me here. And to Christophe and Benedict for organizing. And we can give them a very spirited round of applause, please, for doing this. Thanks for having me. As Benedict mentioned, and I'll say a few words about it at the end, a little bit about Kedge and my connection with Kedge. I've been teaching here off and on for a little bit. And the kind of teaching that you'll see today hopefully will give you all, if you are not participants already now, welcome. If you're not participants already, and if you are online, if you haven't been to Kedge, then hopefully it gives you a good sense of the kind of engagement you get here, and hopefully not just engagement, but also insights. So it's not only fun, but it's also informative. The informative part will come in the following parts. I just want to say a couple of words about what crisis is, how I think about the definition of crisis. I want to, as I promised, present you with 7 questions in 5 parts. And you'll see the 5 parts momentarily, and provide a summary and open it up for Q&A. As Benedict mentioned, we do have a book which I've co-authored with some wonderful colleagues, some of whom have taught here, some of whom do teach here now. So I want to give them the credit they certainly deserve. And these 5 books will be auctioned off at special occasions during the lecture. So even though it is 6 o'clock, and I understand you're here for the cocktail and not really for the presentation, I do hope you'll pay very careful attention to the order in which I present things, to the things that I say, because there will be pop quizzes along the way that will enable you to win this beautiful book. Now, Benedict mentioned that there's a special procedure for having it signed. This procedure is called the following. Okay, watch me carefully. You reach into your pocket and you withdraw some money out of it, okay? Usually about 10 to 20 euros. For those of you who are executives at Kedge, and we have with us members of the executive team, I think 50 euros would be a fair price to pay. Wouldn't it be, Santiago? So, welcome. And you put that in the book, you hand it to me, I take the money and I sign it for you. How about that? I'm only joking. Corruption is neither encouraged nor allowed on Kedge campus. So it was only a joke, and I will, of course, be happy to sign it for you. But do pay attention to what I'm going to talk about. So in all seriousness, if we can kind of delve into the issues, And just a word as we go into the conversation about what a crisis is, as Benedict mentioned, I am trained as a negotiator at Harvard and elsewhere, and I really specialize in the power dynamics of negotiation and leadership. So I'm always interested in how people exercise power, how they get what they want. I work often with leaders who are newly minted CEOs, right? Somebody who comes into their position and they have a title, but they don't know how to use it to get stuff done. And that's, in a nutshell, the essence of my teaching. And this is one of the things that I've been thinking about that I want to share with you is on crisis leadership. And as you know, after the presentation, I'm happy to answer any questions on any topic, whether it's business crisis or political crisis, because we're all living through a crisis, obviously, in Europe. And many of us are thinking about how do we manage crises. So that was the inspiration for the talk. A crisis, of course, is a situation that's characterized by three things: radical unpredictability. Right? In life, we all want to have a little bit of predictability, a sense that we know how things are going to turn out. The reason that we trust pilots of Air France is because we like to have predictability. We like to know that we can trust them to land the plane safely. Don't worry, I had no worry whatsoever when I was landing with these guys that they would land the plane very, very nicely. Not once did they reach out for my advice, which was strange because I was there, but they didn't. But when you have a crisis, not just a problem, but a crisis, is when you have radical unpredictability, when you have no idea how it's going to all turn out. You don't know if it's going to turn out well. And you, in fact, lack the ability to quickly establish and quickly reinstill predictability in the environment or in that particular situation. So radical unpredictability is one way that you should think about a crisis. The other is a crisis is obviously characterized by high urgency. It's not just a problem you have, it's something that you need to solve quickly. And it's something that needs your immediate attention. There's an urgency to a crisis. Not only do you not know what to do, but unfortunately you have to do something about it and do it fast. And finally, a crisis is characterized by the possibility that this situation will have a severe impact either on you personally, on your team, on your company. There is if it's just something minor that does require your attention, maybe it's not a crisis. Maybe, again, it's a challenge that needs to be solved. A crisis really is about these three items. So what I want to do is, as I've mentioned in the presentation invite, I'd like to offer you 7 questions that, as a leader, you should be asking yourself. Because questions are really important because they lead us to better information. Questions, as Henry Kissinger once observed, answers cannot be better than the questions you ask. If you don't ask a good question, you're very unlikely to get a good answer. So this conversation today that we're having hopefully will enable you to ask good questions. And the way I want to, if you will, lead you to this is to offer you 5 different things to think about: the background of the problem, the personalities involved, the team that's involved, the communication that's involved, and the strategy. Those are going to be 5 stages in which I want to present the case of crisis, the questions about crisis leadership. And the way I want to present it, each of those questions, I will present this. I have to speak into the microphone so that the folks online can hear me. I'm sure you can because I project so loud, but hopefully you won't be totally deaf after this. The way I want to present it is by contrasting what your first instinct is in a crisis with what a good question can bring you to realize. That's the reality check. So, for example, the first topic is background, the background of the issue. Your first instinct and this is kind of the first question that I want to share with you. The first instinct in a crisis is to say, this is absolutely unprecedented. And as I want to suggest, your first instincts they're not entirely false, but they're not entirely true as well, and they could be quite misleading. And I put unprecedented in quotation marks. Benedict, can they hear me okay? Can everybody hear me okay? And I say unprecedented quotation marks because you read the word unprecedented a lot these days. Trump's presidency is unprecedented. COVID is unprecedented. 2008 financial crisis is unprecedented. Everything seems to be unprecedented. That's your first instinct. And I want to suggest that the reality check ought to be, how unprecedented is this really? Not only that, but there must have been other past cases that are in many ways either similar or different. This is the diplomatic historian in me, right? That are either similar or different to the case that you're confronting now. So, for example, you may know that, or you may remember that in 2008 there was a major crisis with Société Générale, right, where a trader, Jérôme Kerviel, was convicted of major financial crimes. Very probably one of the largest financial frauds in the history of the operation of the financial system. Right? You could easily say that's unprecedented. And yet, about 5 years prior, or 8 years prior, there was another case in the UK of another trader that brought down another bank. It was certainly a major crisis. That's saying it mildly, but it was not entirely unprecedented. And this is a case for comparing the cases and learning, what can we learn from the past? What have we done in the past that we can do better now, drawing on our past experience? So first question to ask yourself, how is this similar or different from past cases? The second question and the second instinct is always in a crisis to use what in the United States, at least, we call standard operating procedures, SOPs. And are there any folks here from the military who have military background? So in the military, this is a very typical SOP is a term or an abbreviation, at least in the United States, that's used to denote procedures that just go into effect the moment something goes wrong. Right? If something goes wrong, you follow the following 3 steps. This is your first instinct. Standard operating procedures are very tempting to use because if you recall, and here's the first opportunity for somebody to win the marvelous, amazing, award-winning book. What was the first principle of crisis? What makes a crisis a crisis? There were 3 principles, yes? Bingo, radical unpredictability, very well. What's your name? Lucille. Lucille, you win a book. Come up, let's give Lucille a big round of applause. Lucille, thank you, Christophe. You get half of that. And Lucille, we're waiting. So why do we value standard operating procedures? Because SOPs bring a little bit of more predictability into our life. If I have 1, 2, 3, the steps written out, right? If the AC in the room is not working, my 3 steps are cry for help in general, call Benedict, call Christophe, 3 steps, right? And things are fixed. Thank you very much. That because it brings predictability into my life. That's why standard operating procedures are really tempting, but they also constrict our flexibility and our creativity in approaching a crisis that may be quite different from what we're thinking it is, because we haven't faced this quite the same thing before. So my question, the question I want to leave you with, the second question I want to leave you with is Adlai Stevenson in the room? Now for this, I was going to make this, I'm gonna single out a friend of mine and I'm gonna make her blush. But Ekaterina Bordovskaya, who you may know, looked at my slides beforehand and said, do not make this a question, because who the hell knows who Adlai Stevenson was? Nobody will be able to answer that. I assume Adlai Stevenson, anybody? She was right. Okay. And your name is? Vladimir. So Vladimir is right. So I barely remember who Adlai Stevenson is. Adlai Stevenson was the United Nations ambassador during the Cuban Missile Crisis under the Kennedy administration, John F. Kennedy administration. Now, why do I bring up Adlai Stevenson here? Because standard operating procedures, whenever there's a crisis, somebody says, well, we know what to do, boom, boom, boom. There's got to be somebody on your team who says, wait, are we making a mistake here? Maybe this is different. You need somebody, in other words, who is red teaming. Folks have heard red teaming, the idea of having a red team, the idea of somebody questioning your assumptions. Somebody who says, wait, Karine, I don't know if we're right. We know you're the boss, but I have the confidence to say, I just don't think that's, maybe we're being wrong. And here's why I think that is. The reason that's important is because Adlai Stevenson did that during the Cuban Missile Crisis to great effect. He said, maybe we should negotiate with the Soviets versus just go bomb them, right? And I'll skip through the long story because the colleagues at Kedge told me, look, this is executive MBA. This is not a history class. People are going to fall asleep. Don't tell them about the Cuban Missile Crisis. We're tired of the Cuban Missile Crisis. But if you're interested, there's Q&A. I'm very passionate about the Cuban Missile Crisis. So those are the 2 questions in terms of background that you ought to be thinking about. The third question comes in the area generally of personality. Now, you may argue with me about the subheadings, personality, background, but hopefully they are informative enough to tell you what I'm trying to say. So personality-wise, the third question, the third issue is your temptation will be to say, we must do something now. And do something is in quotation marks because that's the usual temptation of leaders who say we need to be seen doing something, right? So as you may recall, or because I looked it up, I'll admit, Daniel Bouton, right, who was Société Générale general director, immediately offers his resignation when the Corviel crisis is revealed, right? We need to do something so that the media, the public sees we're atoning for our sins, whether or not it's actually means anything. And my question that I want you guys to ask yourself as you think about confronting crises or exercising crisis leadership is, are you being driven by the events on the ground? Are you just doing it because you have to do something, because you have to check the box? Or are you actually, in resolving the crisis, shaping the events, shaping the crisis? Are you in control of the crisis, or is the crisis in control of you? And that's a very fundamental psychological issue, but it's also a very fundamental practical issue. Because if you are being driven by events, that's not where you ought to be, obviously. You want to be shaping events. You do not want to be driven by events. So that's what kind of a person you are and how you respond to pressure is something that you should think about as you think about your crisis leadership approach. The fourth question comes from the team category. Who is on your team, etc. So the temptation here in the fourth question is to focus, and this is very, very usual, focus on the leader. Focus on the person who makes the decision, right? Who's making the key choices. That instinct is understandable because that's the person who is visible. They are in the news. They're the one taking the responsibility. I ask you to consider who is who is actually in the trenches, executing the policy. Because anybody here who is in the leadership position knows, with all humility, you are not the one doing the work. Leaders don't do the work, followers do the work. Leaders give them direction, leaders give them inspiration, but it's the followers who are doing the work. And in a crisis, you have to think who is actually executing at the pointy end. Do they understand my intent? In my executive coaching with CEOs, the most time is spent on executive intent. And people look at me and say, well, I did tell them what to do. But I say, but did they understand you? And not only did they understand you, but how did they understand your intent to be? What do you want them to actually do? Because this issue, for example, if you consider the Enron crisis, if you remember back to 2000, I am aging myself. I was 2 years old. No, hold on. It is late in the evening, but I'm not that young. Right? Enron crisis, it's very easy to focus on Jeffrey Skilling, right, the CEO, and say, bad guy, resigned, convicted, etc. He's the one to blame. Of course, he is to blame, but there was a systemic failure with Arthur Andersen as the audit firm, both working for Enron and auditing the company at the same time. Arthur Andersen went underwater as a result of the Enron crisis. So this is an effort to say, while you focus on the person at the top, that's important focus. But even perhaps more important focus are the people who are executing the policy and whether they understand the implications that their individual actions might have on the situation, on the crisis. Number 5, the instinct is to assemble the entire crisis management team, right? This is what leaders do. Get everybody around the table, and very importantly, photograph yourself at the table in a very authoritative pose, dictating to people what to do. You show yourself to be in charge. You show them that you're getting stuff done. You're in control of the crisis, right? So President Macron, a fairly young, well, he's still young, but that was, I think, a couple of years ago, at the head of the table, dictating to people what to do about the riots in France. Here is a more historical photograph. For those of you who ached to hear more about the Cuban Missile Crisis, here's your chance. Everybody's leaving. Close the doors, Christophe. Don't let them. right? Here's President Kennedy right here talking to the Executive Committee of the National Security Council. It's very tempting to get a photograph that shows that you are dealing with the problem. Assemble that crisis leadership team. I take a moment to raffle out another book. Who is going to be our winner? The person who answers the following question. Who was the president of France during the Cuban Missile Crisis? De Gaulle. What's your name? Christophe gets the book. Let's give a big round of applause to Christophe. Christophe, you look like, okay, my accountant here. How much should we ask from Christophe? 600 euros, going once, going twice. Oh, rupees. Oh, it's even better. Voilà, Christophe, c'est pour vous. There, Benedict, I'm exercising my French very briefly. So Charles de Gaulle was, in fact, the president of France, and a very famous exchange took place where an envoy from Kennedy came to see de Gaulle and said, we found the missiles in Cuba. And the envoy said it was Dean Acheson, the former Secretary of State under Harry Truman, very distinguished statesman. And he said, President Kennedy authorized me, President de Gaulle, to show you the pictures, the photographs, to prove to you that the missiles are there. And de Gaulle replied famously, the word of the President of the United States is all I need. And that was the end of the conversation. Anyway, that's a side note to the issue. The crisis management team, it's very tempting to assemble and to show that you are talking to everybody. But really the issue is, who on your team are you talking to and when? How are you managing the intellectual energies of your team? When they are all together in one room, it's going to be one type of conversation. If you leave, one of the things that I advise regularly in executive coaching, especially for leaders who like to be micromanagers. Raise your hand if you've ever worked for a micromanager, somebody who micromanages things, right? It's somebody who wants to be in every meeting, who wants to be copied on every email, who wants to know everything that's going on, who needs to know, whose information, the desire, the hunger for information is insatiable. And I meet with these leaders and I say, have you ever considered stepping out of the room when your staff is meeting and letting them meet on their own? And the question I often get, why would I do that? How will I know what's going on? I need information. And the issue is that when you as a leader are in the room, here's what you are doing to the space of ideas. You are squeezing it. You are squeezing that space for ideas. You're squeezing people's freedom to think and to speak because they are, okay, let me be vulnerable here, completely unscripted. Here's the new director of executive MBA. And I'm a prospective professor in the executive MBA program. Both things are true. Everything I say, I kind of occasionally give Stefan a quick look. Is he happy? Is he laughing? Should I be worried? It's a joke, but it's not a joke. When we're in meetings with the boss, we orient ourselves to the boss. When the boss is there, we know he or she is there. And we think about what we say and think about it carefully. Now, sometimes in a crisis, you need your team to have a better discussion. If you want that to happen, step outside. Let them talk amongst themselves. And by the way, grab a couple of team members separately and say, can you and I talk one-on-one, one-on-two? Can you and I just talk for a few minutes? Try this out in your teams and you'll see the difference, because you'll get a different information out of that person one-on-one than you will when that same person wearing that same clothes at the similar time of day when they are in a larger group, because the group dynamics will be different. Who are you talking to and when are you talking to them? It's your leadership decision, and the temptation is have a team, but resist that temptation. Pressing on. Communication. In communication, the temptation will be to project confidence by communicating publicly. This is similar to, but not exactly the same as doing something, quote unquote. But you have to go public. When there is a crisis, the temptation is very strong to say the public needs to know, or our shareholders need to know, that we are dealing with this. The emphasis is on a public outreach. You have to show people something. You have to telegraph confidence. In crisis negotiations, there's always an effort. We need to be seen as making the first move. Here's my reality check. Can there be something that, in addition to public confidence building, I think that's right. I think that's good. In addition to public confidence building, are there things that could be done secretly? Is there a parallel track that you can open, either with your interlocutor? Is there a secret discussion that you can have outside of the public eye? I ask you to consider the public, the audience, the issue of the audience, whether somebody is watching this or somebody is not, whether there's some kind of a secret back channel that you can create or secret process that you can initiate to handle the crisis. Finally, strategy. The seventh and the last question. The first instinct is to say, we've got a crisis management plan. Again, go back to what crisis is about. It's about radical unpredictability. Unpredictability means we don't know what to do. By saying I have a management plan, I have a plan. I am the man with the plan. Men love saying that. Trust me, I know. I've done it many times. Right? It's very tempting. And yet, remember fundamentally that strategy is as much about what you're going to do as it is about deciding what you are not going to do. This is totally antithetical to a lot of our desire to be active doers, to solve a problem, right? We're problem solvers. We have a problem, we want to solve it. You don't solve a problem by sitting back, the thinking goes. We solve a problem by doing something, activity. You need to show people that you are engaged. Well, sometimes best value is actually created in holding back. By not doing something, by waiting things out, by at least not acting on your first instinct. And that's what I encourage you to think about in this seventh question. Okay. Time is such that we need to proceed to that fun part again, where we test your knowledge. Professors are encouraged to participate for a higher fee, of course, but they're encouraged to participate, and we will see how well they fare. So here's the first question, and you get the book anyway, Christoph, so you don't have to worry. Name at least one. Now, There's two left. Characteristics of a crisis. We have radical unpredictability, and I saw.
Urgency and the student.
All right, perfect. Your name? Alan. Alan, you get a book. Let's get the book for Alan. Next question. This one will be tough because this is really testing your attention to the details of what I talked about. Okay, if the first instinct is to focus on the leader who makes the key choices, what is, yes? Excellent. What is your name? Cornelia. Let's give a big round of applause to Cornelia. The book is here. Christophe will tell you what to put in it.
9 euros.
9 euros. Oi, oi, this is not going well for me. Christophe, come on, man, you're getting half of this. Oh, you forgot. Final book, final question. You've got a crisis management plan. What is the, yes, sir. What we do not do. Sébastien. I remember Sébastien. Book is yours.
Thank you.
Free. This is going worse and worse for me. All right, a couple more just for the glory of your knowledge. All right. Assemble the entire crisis management team and get a photograph in the media. The reality check is secret back channel. Excellent. The first instinct is to say this is unprecedented, but the reality is, let's get more voices. Yes? Huh?
What's the historical things that's happened before that helps here?
And more precisely, yes, the historical thing, but more precisely, I'm sensing, yes? De Gaulle. Okay, I take that as the right answer. I mean, come on, it's France. Any question can be answered with De Gaulle. Compare what's the similarities, what are the differences between the past. Okay, we must do something now. What is the, what?
Find things not to do.
That was, what can we not do? That was something else, but it's a good, yes, Lucia? Yes, yes, good. So excellent. Here are the 7 questions, and I'll send them to Benedict if I may, and I will share these with you. The first one really says, what can we learn from the past cases? How is this similar or different? Do we have somebody who's questioning our assumptions in the room? Is the second question. Are you being driven by the crisis, or are you controlling the crisis? Is the third. Trying to really think about how you talk to your team and in what shape or form you engage with them, and when you don't focus on the leadership but focus on the people who are executing. Thinking about secrecy, a secret channel or secret non-public communication, and finally thinking about what not to do. Let me conclude by inviting you to connect with me on LinkedIn. I would love to be in your network. As Benedict said, this is the kind of teaching, and of course this is 45 minutes, so this is not a 2-week or multi-month program. This is the kind of teaching that you get at Kedge, the kind of engagement, not just insights, but also engagement that you get not only in the negotiation classes and leadership classes, but also others that are taught here. I look forward to your questions. I look forward to our conversation now and at the cocktails. And if I can be helpful to you and your team, I have my own consulting thing going, so I would love to be in touch with you if you have a program that you think I could run, or if you have executive coaching that you think I could do. And that's all I have to say for today. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to your questions. And I'm happy to take questions from online as well. You have one already. Let's do that. And I think I have your glasses, Benedict. And I will not charge for them, despite Christophe's invitation to do so. I will not charge you for the glasses.
Jean-François Bolland asking,
Mhm.
in case of emergency, who is doing the job? Past examples, similar situations.
In terms of, so it's so the question is, in terms of urgency, who is doing the job?
I guess provide past examples.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the urgency issue is that issue of being driven by events, and the amount of time you give to yourself. Oh, he's revising it as we speak.
My answers to the questions.
Oh, those are the answers to the questions. Good. So you spared me the question. I will put your glasses. I will say just as a quick comment that the issue of urgency is always an issue. Are we good? Now nobody's going to pay attention whatsoever now that you've heard cocktails. So, oh, Stefan, I'm in trouble. So the issue of urgency, back to that issue, even though that was not a question. But as you know, we academics like to talk. So whenever I have a chance to say something, I will take the opportunity to. The issue of urgency in a crisis is always one of the central ones. And again, it has to do with that issue of actually acting versus not acting. And the only thing I would say now is to encourage you, if you are on a team that's dealing with a crisis, or you are in fact leading a team that's dealing with a crisis, to try to step back as much as possible. There will be an enormous drive. There will be enormous pull to do something, right? Your value as a leader is holding your team back, right? In the Cuban Missile Crisis, there was a lot. In many different crises, it really worked to hold your team back. But thank you for the comment, which was not really a question, but gave me an opportunity to run my mouth a little bit more. Yes, Christophe, and then I'm going to come. Yes, go ahead. Yes. Well, tell me the question, and then I'll.
In my opinion, COVID-19 crisis was really unprecedented. Would you agree with me or not? And if you agree with me, what do you think we can learn from this unprecedented crisis for the future?
So in terms of public health, it was certainly one of the, again, unprecedented, maybe not. There were other pandemics that have happened before. It was certainly very different from anything that we've seen recently. What can we learn? Obviously, many books are being written about this, but I would say what we've learned is obviously first information that comes into your inbox during a crisis is most usually wrong. And the question is, how do you filter that information? How do you make sure, and I apologize for the little fan action here, but I just want to keep myself cool. The key issue is, how do you filter that information? How do you get in your mind as a leader, how do you get the most accurate information possible? Especially when the urgency, obviously, and the impact, as we talked about, was huge. People were dying in thousands and more than that. So the urgency was obviously enormous, and the desire, the need to act was was enormous. How to create a system beyond an individual leader, not in a specific country, but beyond how to create a system in a team to filter the information that's coming in and to ascertain that it's actually factually right. I think that's one of the key challenges that we are coming out of COVID with trying to implement. Please.
Question is, it's kind of a practical question. It's like in your coaching, what kind of exercise do you use to just like put leaders in a position where they're under stress and they have to deal with all this information coming in, and like, do you have exercise or do you just like teach them?
Yeah. So the question is, in my coaching, do I actually use exercises where I put leaders in a position of stress where they have to learn through doing? Usually in my coaching, people bring their stress to me already. The cases are there. I don't need to create them. The reason is that, I mean, my coaching is highly practical, as is the import of your question, in order to help them help them think through and solve the actual problem that they're facing. Usually the exercises that I do are usually in programs that I teach. That's where we really, frankly, have the time and space to engage in that kind of stepping back from the reality of the actual crisis and to think by analogy, well, gee, how did Henry Kissinger deal with this? How did Condoleezza Rice handle her conversation with Vladimir Putin? How would I have acted in that situation? The problem with that is, for most executives who have an hour with me or 2 hours or whatever, they are super focused. I mean, here's the problem I'm trying to solve. Don't give me a theoretical. Help me think through this, right? And what I go through with them actually is that 5-point plan: the background, the personality, the communication, the team, and where we're going with this. What is the strategy? So the stress is already there. I don't, frankly, need to add the stress. The issue is to organize the stress, make it predictable. You see what I've done with the five points. I've made your very highly unpredictable, messy reality into 5 buckets. Okay, you may not be happy about the buckets, but at least you know there are 5. You can count them pretty easily. Okay, that's the 5th bucket. Got it. What are we doing about the team? Right. Well, the background, I don't know. I don't know that there's a background to this. Maybe, as Christoph says, it's like COVID. Maybe it's like this is totally unprecedented for me. But I'm particularly stressed about my team, right? The personality, I can handle the personalities. The strategy, I think I'm going with that. The team is that's my stress factor. So out of this huge mess that's like, my God, this is weighing on me, they get, okay, I've compartmentalized the problem. Now I at least have some sense of confidence. That's what predictability does for you. Because if there is one thing that I hope you will all bring out of this, is that what crisis does is destroy predictability. That's why I started with this. Predictability, as in a sense that I have that basic confidence that things will work out in the way that I expect. It may not be the way that I like, but at least I kind of know how things will be. And a crisis really shakes that confidence. And what I try to do in my coaching is reinstill that fundamental sense of order. So no more stress needed in that case, honestly. Anybody else? Benedict? Yes.
It's a real question.
It's a real question this time.
Yeah. Yeah, I got my glasses. So it's from Ekapol, who is one of an executive MBAs. Don't you think that PR is still necessary in the case of Macron or Kennedy? They have to show that they are doing things, even if you use a back door or red phone to solve things.
So the question is, if public relations is still necessary, even if there is a secret channel or right of communication. Of course, public relations is necessary, but again, just like being driven by events versus driving events, shaping events, PR has to be working for you. If you are in charge of the organization, if you're the leader, have the PR work for you. Don't let them box you in. A lot of times what happens is, well, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, Mr. General Director, whatever, we need to say something. You can't just stay quiet, right? And your responsibility in that case is to say, I can take my time to figure out how I want to frame this. There is an insatiable desire in society for information. The public, the audiences, your shareholders are dying to know more, and they will never be satisfied. The moment you give them an inch, they will ask for a foot. To use the American metric system, which of course in Europe may not be familiar, but you give them a centimeter and they will ask for a meter. I did grow up with the metric system that you use in Europe. So it's your PR matters, but it has to be a matter of your crisis management strategy, not vice versa. Crisis management strategy is not part of your PR simply. PR is a subset of your strategy and has to be subjugated to that. More questions? One more question. Oh, it's yours.
Yeah, just you've been talking about crisis leadership in case of an unpredictable event. What about a predictable event? I'm thinking of the climate crisis that we're facing. So would those questions be applied? The question you raised, could this be applied to something that is predictable in a way?
Yeah, the challenge. So predictable. It's not only a predictable event. The climate crisis is not only predictable, but it is also so slow moving and so everyday that it is. Sorry. The fact that I have to do this is an example of the climate crisis. Well, this is a localized climate crisis in Kedge. Okay, so this is a little bit different, but be that as it may, the problem. I'm sure you've heard the analogy of the frog. Have you guys heard the analogy of the frog with the climate crisis? That if you drop a frog in a pot of boiling water, the frog will feel the heat and jump out. And if you put the frog in a pot of cold water and just boil it, it will boil to death. The problem with the predictability of it is that we get complacent, right? That it's very difficult to motivate, to generate political will to do something about it. We're all living through this. We're all living through okay, so you sit a little bit more and you wave at yourself and you make yourself cooler. So maybe that's okay, and everything will be okay, and it's not such a big deal. And the problem is that the problems, even though it's called a climate crisis, it's not really a crisis. It's a climate change process. No, I don't mean to suggest that it's not a crisis in terms of a significance, severity of the problem. But the urgency is not there, and the unpredictability is not there. As I say, those two things that I shared with you make for a definition of a crisis. And that for me is part of the problem, is that we don't see that the urgency is there. At least by we, I mean a lot of the world, the political will is very difficult to generate, to do something about it meaningfully. And then there's, difficult climate negotiations, which is a whole different problem. So in a certain sense, a crisis galvanizes that kind of political action that helps things to get done. Hopefully that answers it somewhat. It helps to get stuff done when there is a crisis. When there is more predictability, unfortunately, that goes against the marshaling of political will.